The Death of Desire. If someone were to explain the plot of The Great Gatsby to someone unfamiliar with it, that person would hear of a man named Gatsby who is extravagantly wealthy, throws seemingly continuous parties in his mansion, and is always surrounded by interesting people. The person hearing this tale also finds out that Gatsby only throws these parties to impress Daisy, the woman he dated in years prior. When they dated, he was very poor, so these parties would convince her of the riches he can now offer. Gatsby tries to get back his love and ultimately fails by getting tangled in a web of complex situations that ultimately led to his demise. If someone were to ask this person after the fact what he or she thinks that green symbolizes, this person would most likely say money. Money is the drive for all of Gatsby's desires, and he would probably not have anything to win over Daisy without it. But this way of thinking could not be more wrong. When Nick Carraway entered Jay Gatsby's life, you realize that green represents everything Gatsby wants in this world. Green represents his desire, the desire for Daisy, the desire to finally be at the top of the social class, and the desire to finally be happy. Green symbolizes Gatsby's desires from the outset in the first chapter where Nick observes Gatsby for the first time at night behind their homes. Nick informs us. He stretched out his arms towards the dark water in a curious way. I distinguished nothing except a single green light minute and far away. 21. This green light was in fact the light at the end of Daisy's dock. Gatsby was stretching out his arms, reaching for the light, but not able to touch it. He is almost reaching what he desired most, but not quite there. When Gatsby finally meets Daisy and they fall in love again, he realizes something. Fitzgerald writes, "It had seemed as close as a star to the moon. Now it was again a green light on a dock." Gatsby's count of enchanted items had diminished by 1. 93. At this point, Gatsby gets what he desires most, a way to repeat his past, but this time he'd be rich and happy and even more in love. He realizes that when he thought Daisy's light was a lifetime away, it was merely just across the bay. He no longer dreamed of reaching it and how mystical the light would be. He already had achieved it and now saw it as just the light that was in his way of seeing Daisy. But at the end of this story, Nick realizes just how much importance the green light possesses. I thought of Gatsby's wonder when he first picked out the green light at the end of Daisy's dock. 180. When he is in mourning of his friend, he comes to the understanding that the green light was just a green light, but because of the importance that Gatsby put on it, it represented so much more. Although in the end it is just a green light, his wonder and desire to achieve his goals gave it an almost magical power, so special that if Gatsby were to reach it, that everything that was not perfect in his life would become so. As the novel's plot continues to unfold, the color green takes on even more meaning. In Chapter 4, green is presented in other forms. As Nick says, sitting down behind many glares of glass in a sort of green leather conservatory, we started to town. 64. In this quote, one sees that in this lovely car, Gatsby is trapped from the rest of the world by layers of glass while sitting in these green leather seats. Gatsby is trapped just as he thinks Daisy is trapped from him in her own world, trapped in her own life. Along with this, sitting in these seats also represents Nick's desire to know more about Gatsby. For the duration of this car ride, Gatsby tells Nick the truth to clear away all the rumors. He says, "Well, I'm going to tell you something about my life. I'll tell you God's truth." 65. But Nick suspects Gatsby is still lying, which he is, which sparks Nick's curiosity. On a later drive into town, Tom, Nick, and Jordan ride in this car, whilst Daisy and Gatsby ride in Tom's car. On the way back, Daisy and Gatsby take Gatsby's green leather car. Their leaving together was a way to show that before Tom's confrontation and Daisy's being forced to say that she had never loved Tom, Gatsby had not truly fulfilled his desires. On the way home, Gatsby's desires had finally been fulfilled, but was not quite as satisfying as he had dreamed, and this reality was hitting him would lead to his untimely death. Death is ultimately what becomes of Gatsby's desires. Death is the final outcome. Throughout the novel, death remains a staple of sadness and mourning, like in these references to the color here. All the cars have the left rear wheel painted black as a mourning wreath. 9. The knuckle is black and blue. 12. He went into an immediate decline. His children sold his house with the black wreath still in the door. 88. These examples all show how black is commonly associated with pain, sorrow, and death. While he hadn't yet achieved his desires, he was in constant sorrow. But when he finally achieved them, it led to his death. This desire of repeating the past could not be reached. It was an impossible task. Too many significant events had occurred to be undone. Daisy was married, had a child, and she now lived in the East. Too much had changed, and the people who were unable to deal with this fact became rampant and destroyed everything in their paths, and in George Wilson's case, it led to the murder of Jay Gatsby. After fully reading The Great Gatsby, it is clear to see that green represents desire, and black represents death. Green has little to do with money, but has plenty of references towards Gatsby's desire of Daisy. Some are in plain sight, like Daisy's green light, and some are harder to find, like Gatsby's car with the green leather seats. In the end, it is apparent that Gatsby will never be able to fulfill his desire because it is an impossible one. Black represents sorrow, despair, and death, and both men who had lived in Gatsby's mansion ended up dying from their desires. Together, green and black are representative of both Gatsby's life of desire and his untimely death.